The House will come to order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll, and you may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to our guest chaplain, Representative Helgerson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Representative Adam Smith.
Well, this is a first for me. Today is the first day of Lent. For those of you that are Catholic and Christian, you understand. But it's a special day for prayer and for fasting. It's also a day of reflection. Many of you know that when we go to church later on today, that we will get ashes on our forehead. The ashes are to remind us that death is coming. But there's also a point that we remember that there is a new birth that will come. It'll be hard, it's hard to be here and not to say that we have all experienced death in a totally different way this year. Family, friends, constituents, we understand how difficult it's been for all of us. But the rebirth is coming. And with that rebirth, may we reach out to all of us and with peace and with love and work together to build a better state. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we do have a few people that are excused, okay. I was just looking at who was excused. Okay.
Has every member had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and take the attendance. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2393 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning workers' compensation relating to post-traumatic stress disorder suffered by first responders. House Bill number 2394 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning the research and development tax credit relating to the amount of the credit, expanding eligibility beyond taxpayers subject to the corporate income tax. House Bill number 2395 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning taxation relating to sales and compensating use taxes. I'm on. Want me to go ahead? There. Transit guest taxes and prepaid wireless 911 fees requiring collection and remittance by marketplace facilitators. House Bill number 2396 by the Committee on Appropriations, an act making concerning appropriations for the fiscal years ending June 30, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and through 2032 for state agencies, authorizing certain transfers, capital improvement projects, and fees, imposing certain restrictions, limitations, and directing authorizing certain receipts, disbursements, acts incidental to the foregoing. House Bill number 2397 by the Committee on Appropriations, an act making concerning appropriations for fiscal years ending June 30, 20, an act making concerning appropriations for fiscal years ending June 30, 2022 through June 30th, 2024 for state agencies, authorizing certain transfers, capital improvement projects, and fees, imposing certain restrictions, limitations, directing or authorizing certain receipts, disbursements, acts incidental to the foregoing.
The chair recognizes the majority leader for motion to resolve into the committee of the whole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The chair appoints Representative Stephen Johnson to chair the Committee of the Whole.
Good morning, Committee on the birth of a new Committee of the Whole. And our first item of business is House Bill 2178. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2178, the chair recognizes Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2178 came out of our local government committee and is the same bill that we ran last year concerning the City of Americus, which is in my district, a town of about 900 people. It passed last year 122-3, and what it would do, the City of Americus was originally platted back in the late 1850s, and 2 blocks were dedicated to a city park and to a university. They've already got a city park. They don't plan to put in a university, so they would like that deed restriction lifted so they can either sell the land and use the proceeds to develop the rest of the city or to develop it into housing. There were no committee amendments, no opponents. There was no fiscal note. So I would ask to see if there's any questions.
May stand for questions, and we would recognize Representative Curtis on the bill. I'm hearing it is difficult to hear in the gallery. Is that accurate? So please speak clearly in the mic if we can hold the sound down, and if we can check that speakers are working correctly for the gallery, that would be useful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the previous representative did a wonderful job of explaining this bill, and I urge your support.
Representative, if you get right up to the mic to have the best shot at our gallery having a chance.
Okay, can you hear me now? Sort of? Sorry. Okay, I'm speaking very loud. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The previous representative did a great job of explaining this bill, and I urge your support.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 2178? There's no further discussion. Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2178 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Schreiber to pass House Bill 2178 favorable. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Next item of business is House Bill 2187, very close to 78. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2187, the chair recognizes Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no committee amendments. HB 2187 would enact the First-Time Homebuyer Savings Account Act. This bill would allow individuals on and after July 1st, 2022 to open an account with a financial institution and designate the entirety of the account to be used for the purchase or construction of a primary residence in Kansas.
And for just a moment, Representative Anderson, 2 things. If the body can keep the noise down for the benefit of the gallery currently, and if you can speak right into the mic.
My apologies. This bill would allow maximum contributions to an account of $3,000 for an individual and $6,000 for a married couple. A maximum amount of all contributions to an account in tax years would be $24,000 for an individual and $48,000 for a married couple. The maximum total amount in an account would be $50,000. There is a fiscal note associated with HB 2187 in the amount of $3.5 million, but proponents and supporters of the legislation believe this to only be the case if it were used by everyone that was eligible. I believe any cost to the state that helps retain the future generations of Kansans is money well spent and will have an economic benefit for the long term. This bill passed the House 123-2 last year and is a bill that was part of the House leadership team's 5-point plan that was derailed due to COVID. And with that, I will stand for questions.
On the bill, we have a few queued up for questions. We will move through that as we are able. We will start with Representative Blake Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will the carrier of the bill stand for a question or two? All right. Representative, have you been to the Capitol before you were elected?
I have.
And were you an intern at any point?
I was.
Who were you an intern for?
Representative John Carmichael.
Would you say that, well, first of all, you can't say names, remember that, down here at the well. Would you say that the representative from Wichita might have an undue influence on you as a representative here in this body?
I'll just say it was a great experience.
Very well. Well, we look forward to your contributions to this body. Welcome to the legislature.
On the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The carrier did a great job. I don't like, for the most part, when people wear better ties than I do, but today he's done a great job. So this bill acts much like a 529 account for higher education costs. This bill helps with housing costs, which I think is really important for our next generation of home buyers. And so I urge your support on that issue. I'm also up here speaking on behalf of the Future Caucus. So we wanted to find a bill that we could all kind of get behind as a group. And it actually spans a wide gamut of political opinions within that group. And you can imagine how difficult it is to find one bill. But we put into our rules, 2/3 of the caucus would vote on it. And then at least one person of each party has to agree to the bill. And this is the bill that we agreed upon. And so I think it's a great idea. It will do a lot for our younger generation to keep them in Kansas and buy homes in Kansas. So I urge your support. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Would the young representative stand for a question? Do you know who Noble Leslie Devote is? That's the question. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If there is no further discussion on the bill, Representative, you may close.
Thank you. I know from personal experience that it has been hard to keep individuals and young professionals my age from laying down roots in Kansas and picking Kansas as the place to grow and raise their family. We have a responsibility as lawmakers to do everything we can to attract and retain our next generation of Kansans, and I believe HB 2187 does precisely that. I encourage you to support HB 2187, and with that, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report House Bill 2187 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Anderson to report House Bill 2187 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Next item of business is House Bill 2070. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2070, the chair recognizes Representative Epley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no committee amendments. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to rise in support of House Bill 2070. This is a fairly focused bill and narrow in scope, and so I hope this will go rather quickly. I will tell you, in the theme of rebirth today, this is a reborn bill from the last biennium. It passed out of Fed and State unanimously, and then at the point it was getting ready to be teed up, we had a COVID exit, so it never really got to the floor of the House. So this is from the last biennium. It's here again. 2070 is a bill about doing just a little bit more to level the playing field for our state's nonprofit colleges. More and more students and parents are using credit cards to pay for their tuition bills. Often they are trying to earn miles or points on the big purchase, and they are bigger purchases all the time. Credit card companies either charge a fee or transaction of between 1% to 3% for these transactions. Thus, when a student pays his tuition bill with a credit card, the college has to pay the credit card company what can be a pretty hefty bill at times. And in some of the cases of these colleges, that bill totals up to $100,000 to $300,000 a year. With our 22 non-for-profit colleges in the state of Kansas, that can total up to $1.6 million in fiscal year 2019, the last year that we have data. So this is a significant problem. Kansas is one of the few states where nonprofit colleges are not allowed to ask students to pay that credit card surcharge fee. But in deference, Regents institutions can and oftentimes do. So it is not a level playing field, and all this bill tries to do is level that playing field going forward. We heard from several colleges and not-for-profits that they would like to see this bill passed so that they can compete on a level playing ground. This money must come from somewhere, and so this will allow them the opportunity to pass those charges on, just like other universities do in the state of Kansas. So for that and many other reasons, I urge your support for House Bill 2070 going forward. I'd be happy to stand by for any questions.
On the bill, Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My esteemed tax committee colleague did an excellent job in explaining this bill. It's a good bill, and with that, let's show some love for the independent colleges today and support HB 2070.
Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the carrier stand for a question?
Yes, certainly.
Does this bill, that fee, I do see a good reason for it, but is that just on tuition, or does it cover any other payments to the college? Say someone goes in the bookstore and buys a book or something, would that pertain to that as well?
It is my understanding this only covers tuition at this time in the bill.
All right, thank you for that. And as a graduate of a nonprofit independent college, I would like to voice my support for this bill. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
On the bill, Representative Carpenter. Representative Blake Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think this legislation addresses an issue here in the state of Kansas where we allow public entities to remove or charge a surcharge for those credit or debit card items. We have the same exemption, I believe, for municipalities and counties as well. However, businesses are not allowed under current law to charge such a fee into their prices or bake them into their prices. That's actually against current Kansas law. So while this bill doesn't address that, I think the body at some point does need to look at allowing businesses to make their own decisions. If we're going to exempt out all of these government entities and make it to where they can charge these fees, I think that we should also do so for private businesses. I will be supporting this legislation today. I don't have an amendment or anything like that, but I think that we do need to start that conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If there is no further discussion, Representative Epley, you may close.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report House Bill 2070 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Epley to report House Bill 2070 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Next item of business is House Bill 2087. To carry 2087, the chair recognizes Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, I was on the on-deck circle last year when this bill came up. I took 2 steps forward and we adjourned because of COVID. So we're here again. This bill comes out of the Joint Rules and Regs Committee. In that committee, we recognized years ago that when they came in with their rules and regs, the agencies did not know what it was going to cost the constituents out here, the businesses or the people, when they wrote the rules and regs. We attempted to correct that with this bill in 2018. We're back now to clean the bill up. The former budget director came to us and said it imposed too much work and it also infringed on the Constitution where it allowed him to deny rules and regs, which he did not have the authority to do. So we've cleaned it up, and that's why we're here today. It removes the power of the Director of Budget to nullify or turn down a new rule or reg. That's one. He allows the regulations that come in because of a federal mandate. They do not have to review those. And if the agency determines that the rule or reg does not exceed the $3 million mark, which we put in the bill, then they do not have to run that through their budget group to review all of those numbers. And that was where the big trouble came in. And that's over a 2-year period. Now, we also put in this reg, or this rule, this law, that after 2 years, the legislative post-audit will look at all these numbers and determine whether that $3 million limit is the one we want, whether it should be higher or lower. But that's after the 2-year period passes, and that was the amendment we put on this bill in the committee. Since we've done this, we've noticed some problems in the joint rules and regs. The agencies are coming in. They are required to have an economic impact statement. Some are doing that and some are doing a very good job. Others are dragging their feet and not complying with our directives that we as a legislature put upon them. So we'll have to deal with that. We also ask them when they come in, is this the intent of the legislature? It goes through the AG. Every rule and reg goes through the AG, and they come in and they say, it's what's written. So we have to work with all the chairs and all the members of our legislature now to remember, when you write a rule, when you write these laws, you need to remember to make it very clear what the intent is. So the joint rules and reg can have a little easier lifetime when they go into these meetings. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand for questions.
Chair would recognize Representative Lewis Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rules and regs that we heard in this bill were pretty point clear that we worked on this, or the representative worked on this with his groups quite heavily. But Representative, I do have a question for you. Could you explain to the group how the $3 million threshold came about? That was kind of a stickler in our committee during when we worked the bill. Thank you.
It was a point of contention in the committee, and what happened was myself and my friend from Sedgwick County, Wichita, we sat down with all the players, the agencies and the businesses, and in one room we decided and argued for a great amount of time. There were so many lawyers in that room I broke out in a rash. But anyway, we agreed, the agencies all wanted $5 million, so it was a higher threshold. The businesses wanted $1 million. We agreed on $3 million. It was a hard-fought agreement, and that's where the $3 million came from.
On the bill, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to pick up right where my friend the chairman left off, we had $5 million is what a lot of the business community wanted. $1 million is the threshold that a lot of agencies wanted. We agreed on $3 million, but we also said, as the chairman told us, we're going to look at this in 2 years, and we're going to see whether it should be 3, whether it should be 5, whether it should be 1, or whether it should be something else. But I hope folks will honor the compromise that we reached, because we worked hard to get everybody on the same page. The second thing I want to emphasize to all of you is what we're talking about here with insufficient statements of financial impact is truly not a partisan issue. It happened during the prior administration. It happens during this administration. And about half the agencies that we see are independent agencies, meaning they have their own board, commission, whatever. And so don't let this get partisan, because we have to get the attention, and I hope they're listening, of some state agencies that these requirements for financial impact statements are serious, and we intend that you are going to substantively respond. Because if you don't, the committee has been discussing another alternative that you really wouldn't like. So please comply with what we asked you to do. And I appreciate the chairman's hard work over now literally years to get us to where we're at. So I rise in support of HB 2087. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If there is no further discussion, Representative Highland, you may close.
Thank you, Representative, for those remarks. Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report House Bill 2087 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Highland to report House Bill 2087 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. The next item of business is House Bill 2115. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2115, the chair recognizes Representative Kincannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You have heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Please continue.
So House Bill 2115 establishes the Joint Committee on Child Welfare System Oversight. The number one recommendation out of the 2020 Interim Committee on Foster Care Oversight was that the oversight needs to continue. This bill sets up the framework for the committee, the appointment process, the topics to review, and authorizes the committee to make recommendations and introduce bills. So after the bill passed out of committee, it was discovered that a sentence was missing the word "of." So, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to rectify that error. Yeah, I guess I forgot to take mine out.
It appears the amendment is short. The clerk will read.
Page 2 in line 18 after members by inserting "of."
You may proceed, Representative. If you have any further explanation of our two letters. And if there's no further explanation.
I don't. I was trying to think of something clever, and it's gone from.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Seeing no one else on the amendment, Representative, you may close on the amendment.
I close on my amendment.
Heard the motion by Representative Concannon to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes.
So the 2020 Interim Committee on Foster Care Oversight was filled with testimony and discussion of all aspects of the foster care system. Numerous programs connected to child welfare was presented and discussed. We had lots of questions that we would like to ask a lot more. Just this week, I've heard questions like, are these programs working? What does evidence-based programming mean? What are the funding mechanisms? Through that committee work, we discovered gaps in the system. There's gaps in foster care and education, in foster care and mental health. There's gaps in foster care and juvenile justice, in the IDD population, and there's gaps in the process of aging out. So we want to dig deeper and discover how to close those gaps. We also have the fairly new Families First programming that appears to be making inroads in prevention. Those contracts need oversight and the opportunity to follow and document progress as well as shortfalls. The topic of child welfare is difficult and often emotional. I have discovered through conversations with both foster parents and biological parents that they just want to be heard. A public comment period in an oversight committee would allow those folks to share their story, feel heard and supported. Kansas is losing foster homes, and we need to stop the bleeding. The Kansas foster care system became privatized in 1996. My research shows there was an oversight committee early on, and the reason for its dissolution is unclear. Without that oversight, the foster care system has operated with what it has seemed to be checks and balances, but what we are seeing, it's failing on a regular basis. You've likely read or heard of difficulties in the foster care system. Through some excellent investigative reporting, we now know about financial mismanagement and by one of the foster care contractors. We've heard of falsification of documentation, and most recently, the sexual assault of a child by an employee. We've heard in the past about missing children and about children sleeping in offices. I have had conversation with foster parents and child welfare professionals that speak of court orders that were ignored, ignoring medical specialists, denied therapy, physical abuse from unsupervised visits with biological parents, overuse of medication, and I could go on, but let me just say, Kansas is failing these children. So, Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions.
On the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Bowsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to commend the chairwoman of Children and Seniors for her work on this bill. I think it's long overdue. You guys know that our system's been privatized since 1996. I've been elected since 2014, and I've had the privilege of serving on a foster care oversight committee most every interim that I've been here. I think that it's a move in the right direction to set up a standing committee. I was asked in the caucus today about the makeup of this committee, and as I'm sure the chairwoman said, it's modeled after the Bob Bethel Committee, so it would have 2 Republican members of the Children and Seniors Committee, 1 Democratic member of the Children and Seniors Committee, and 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat from the House as a whole. It would have 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat from the Senate Public Health and Welfare, and then a Republican from the Senate and a Democrat from the Senate. I believe 2 Republicans from the Senate, and we have added another appointment out of the House for an appointment by the majority leader. So it would be the Speaker and the majority leader appointment out of the House. With that, I'll urge your support for this bill. I think, again, it's long overdue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to mention to the body that some may feel like this is another level of government, this committee, but I want to encourage you that that is not what this is. This it's a coordinated structure to address problems that we have in a large system. There's a lot of good people working and good organizations working, but there is no forum for people who have been harmed by the foster care system or people who have suggestions to improve the foster care system. There's really no public forum for them to come and explain their problems. This Oversight Committee is a venue and it's an opportunity to hear from the people. And this model has worked with some of the other agencies that we've had issues with. So I just stand in support of this bill and I encourage you to do the same. Thank you.
Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of observations. This bill is fine. It's a step forward. The foster care system was privatized in 1996, 6 governors ago. It's been a mess. It was a mess before it became privatized. It's been a mess since it was privatized. Children who come into this system are represented in our adult prisons in a significant way because the system, the state, the substitute parent failed. This committee can do some good without any doubt, but until we have a secretary of the agency that is willing to go ahead without regard to political party to hold the contractors accountability to perform on the contracts that they have with the state, nothing will change. It could be as simple as deploying agency staff to the contractors' offices and granting them access to their internal management systems to verify that, in fact, family visits occur, to verify that complaints are being resolved. We have an ombudsman for long-term care because that population is operating at a significant disability. An ombudsman that can advocate and investigate on their behalf. And I hope this committee will again revisit the notion that these families and these children need somebody other than the attorney that represents the kids and other than the court-appointed special advocate, somebody who can really dig in and has no job other than to resolve these problems that we can achieve better outcome for kids. The carrier of this bill said it's an emotional issue for people. Darn right it is. We've done a terrible job. This has to get better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If there is no further discussion, Representative Concanon, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have to right the ship. I've seen this process work with Medicaid. Through the years, the Bob Bethel Oversight Committee has addressed numerous problems head-on and made the system better. I want to see this for foster care. Kansas must do better for the children who we have taken into state care. Mr. Chairman, I move when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2115 favorably for passage.
As amended.
As amended.
You've heard the motion by Representative Concanon to report House Bill 2115 favorably as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Next item of business is House Bill 2158. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2158, the chair recognizes Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no committee amendments. House Bill 2158 will make permanent provisions for the Advisory Committee on Trauma and the statewide trauma regional councils to conduct closed meetings and to keep privileged records regarding trauma cases. This is currently set to expire on July 1st, 2021, and HB 2158 will remove the sunset date for this authority. The closed committee peer-reviewed process is necessary to protect patient confidentiality and will allow healthcare providers to critically assess care delivery and site-specific trauma protocols through an advisory capacity. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
On the bill, Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. This is a great bill. The carrier did a great job, and I urge your support. Thank you.
If there is no further discussion, Representative Lynn, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report HB 2158 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Lynn to report House Bill 2158 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Our next item of business is House Bill 2172. For the purpose of carrying 2172, the chair recognizes Representative Newland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were amendments.
Continue.
I move the passage of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill came out of the Water Committee, so I'll try not to drown you in information. There are approximately 1,600 water rights that were not available to be put into this multiple use system. And so there's something needs to be done. You know, that these things were not available to those between the years of 2000 and 2009. Modifying water usage calculations and fees for multi-year flex accounts and permitting alternative-based average water use calculations in prorated terms. The bill would amend the existing law concerning multi-year flex accounts and the ability for those who did not have a perfected right. Now, perfected right is an actual history of using water as authorized by a permit. Now they can utilize these accounts. The bill would allow for water right owners to apply net irrigation requirements as a substitute for past use in order to establish a flex account. The multi-year flex account is a voluntary measure, allowing water right holders to both manage and conserve their water resources. 2172 would also amend existing law by providing clarity that a water right approved after 2004 would be able to participate in the program. With that, I'll stand for questions.
On the bill, Representative Stogstall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to commend the carrier of the bill for an excellent explanation of a rather complicated bill. We had a great discussion of it in committee and passed out of committee unanimously. I would urge your support for this bill. Thank you.
Representative Highland.
This is a great bill, but after it passed out of committee, the reviser and the Department of Agriculture proposed a needed amendment. It's a technical amendment in nature. I have the amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 3, line 5, after or by inserting an. Also in line 5 by striking use. Also in line 5 after groundwater by inserting use control.
Representative, you may explain.
Not much to explain. It just clarifies that who can get into this program voluntarily. I'll stand for questions.
Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing no discussion, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
Heard the motion by Representative Highland to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Back on the bill, is there any further discussion? Seeing no further ideas to float, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HB 2172 favorably for passage as amended.
You've heard the motion by Representative Newland to report House Bill 2172 favorably as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. The motion passes. Our next item of business is House Bill 2096. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2096, the chair recognizes Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2096 came out of the House Judiciary Committee. It would amend the Kansas Open Records Act to restrict access to personal information of some additional individuals. What would be restricted is the information from a public access on public website that is searchable by a keyword search that identifies the home address or home ownership of such persons. And these additional people to be added would be Kansas Department of Corrections employees, local correctional officers, local detention officers, judicial branch employees, presiding officers who conduct hearings pursuant to the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act, members of the State Board of Tax Appeals, administrative law judges who conduct hearings pursuant to the Workers' Comp Act, administrative law judges employed by the Office of Administration Hearings, members of the Workers' Comp Appeals Board, and municipal court employees. There were no amendments in committee and no opponents. The fiscal note, there was no fiscal note to the state, but the Kansas Association of Counties and the League of Municipalities said that there would be some fiscal impact to their associations. I'll be ready to stand for questions.
On the bill, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might also add that this same legislation was passed by the Senate last year by a vote of 40-0. It's pretty hard to find that kind of consensus over there, so, take that into account. Also, for the benefit of my caucus, I note that a typographical error was made in our bill brief. I was busy plagiarizing the work of others and claiming it as my own. And so where you see in capital letters, Legislature of the State of Kansas, page 2, Office of Reviser of Statutes, and the name of the reviser, that's the evidence that I was plagiarizing from her bill brief and cut and paste that description. So I'm sorry for any confusion. There also was a question asked in my caucus this morning as to whether or not this is the procedure by which victims of domestic violence can protect their location and identity from stalkers, assailants, etc. And I did verify this is not the bill or the portion of the law that's typically used for that purpose. Instead, the bill we heard last week concerning the Safe at Home Act, I think it is the procedure to try to protect folks in that circumstance. This is a good bill. I'm sorry to take so long briefing it. I apologize again to my caucus for my error. I urge you to support HB 2096. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On the bill, Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've read through the bill, and I want everybody to know, overall, I do support the bill. I think it's a really good one that needs to happen. I've got a couple concerns about this right now. The carrier of the bill read through several people, job titles, et cetera, who are included in it. My concern is who's not included in this right now. And I did just some basic research on the internet as far as contract type labor, and I'm not talking temporary or the person that goes in to change a fire extinguisher out, et cetera. But there are full-time, permanent employees that work in the prison system that are not part of the DOC. A few of them are registered nurses, correctional psychologists, LPNs, clinical directors, behavior health coordinators, certified medication aides, mental health professionals, emergency medical techs, dental and dental assistants. So with that, I want to say I had an amendment. I've got one drafted up here, but I've been working with the chairman, been working with leadership here on how to better word it. We're not quite satisfied with it. I want it to come across as a friendly amendment, so at this time, I'm not going to offer it up, but I think we're going to pass it over and have a discussion when this thing goes over to the Senate to see if we can get something improved in it. But I just wanted to get the point across, and I appreciate the body's time. Thank you.
If there is no further discussion, Representative Schreiber, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2096 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Schreiber to report House Bill 2096 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Our next item of business is House Bill 2007. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2007, Chair recognizes Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no committee amendments.
Please continue.
House Bill 2007 amends existing law concerning regulation of motor carriers by the Kansas Corporation Commission. This bill removes outdated language and some statutes that were remnants from before the motor carrier industry was deregulated. It cleans up or clarifies other existing statutes without making substantive changes and allows motor carriers to opt out of receiving electronic correspondence from the Kansas Corporation Commission if they choose. I will note this bill was introduced last year as House Bill 2524. It passed the House by a margin of 118 to 0. The only minor change from last year's bill to this year's bill is a change that was adopted in the Senate last year, which allows motor carriers to opt out of electronic communications from the Kansas Corporation Commission. So that provision is included in this year's bill. In the House Transportation Committee hearing, the director of the Transportation Division of the Kansas Corporation Commission provided proponent testimony, stating the bill would remove the outdated language and requirements, and noted the bill resulted from a review of the statutes by KCC staff, representatives of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the Kansas Highway Patrol, and the Kansas Motor Carriers Association. There were no opponent or neutral testimony offered. According to the fiscal note prepared by the Division of the Budget, the KCC indicates enactment of this bill would have no fiscal effect on the agency. Mr. Chair, I'll stand for questions.
Is there any discussion on the bill? Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2007, as you notice, talks about motor carrier laws, and we know how important our vehicles, especially our large trucks, are on the road. And we heard this in transportation, and we also know that part of this is working with the State Corporation Commission as well. I'm in favor of it. You know, each year I serve on transportation, I learn a lot about what's going on, especially about motor carriers and how they really function and how they're able to move. And really, for them, we have to be very thankful during this COVID because it makes it very difficult for trucks to be able to get around at this time, especially with the drivers. I would ask you to please vote for this as well. Thank you.
There is no further discussion. Representative Howe, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2007 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Howe to report 2007 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Our next item of business is House Bill 2076 for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2076. The chair recognizes Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. As such, I move adoption of the committee report as amended.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, House Bill 2076 comes to the floor today from the Judiciary Committee. House Bill 2076 clarifies that a person who is released on an appearance bond that needs to be rearrested is actually delivered to the custodial officer of the court by the surety in the county where the complaint subject to the bond was filed. So the statute currently is a little bit ambiguous in explaining that. So this is a clarification bill that the Kansas Sheriff's Association asked that we put forth for consideration. Currently, the change would, the change would address the problem of some sureties failing to transport offenders to the correct county. So we hope to solve that problem. The amendment that occurred in committee actually clarified who the custodial officer of the court is. There's been some concern about that as well. So that is the sheriff or the keeper of the jail is how we define that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
On the bill, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a good bill. I might also point out that it was supported not only by the Sheriff's Association, but by the Professional Bail Bonds People's Association as well. What it's really about is it basically requires the bondsman when somebody has taken off to bring them back to the place where the charges are pending, not just to drop them off at the nearest jail. And so I think it makes really good sense to do this, and I appreciate the fact that the bonds people and the Sheriff's Association both support this. I support it. I hope you will too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If there is no further discussion, Representative Owens, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had my people reach out to Dog the Bounty Hunter's people, but he was unavailable to come testify today. But I can assure you he agrees with this as well. So with that in mind, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HB 2076 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Owens to report House Bill 2076 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Our final action of business, no, not final action, but the last action of business, House Bill 2104 for the purpose of carrying 2104. Chair recognizes Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and may I say it's good to say that once again. There were committee amendments, and so I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Please continue.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2104, as amended, would exempt nonprofit educational institutions from paying sales tax on purchases related to the building, maintenance, enlargement of facilities used to house non-students in the institution. An existing sales tax exemption for such institutions excludes facilities used primarily for human housing. So, The bill was brought to us originally by CPRF, and those of you from the Wichita area know that it's Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation. They maintain and operate a 100-unit independent living apartment complex, and this is for people with disabilities. It's known as the Timbers, so those of you from the Wichita area or surrounding area probably are familiar with this. The Timbers was a mid-1970s HUD project. And for the time, this was pre-ADA, you understand that. It had some cutting-edge accessibility features for the time. But, 45 years later, it's dated, it needs to be updated, and it needs to be replaced, so they're embarking on a significant rebuild. They applied to the Kansas Department of Revenue for a project exemption certificate, but due to the language that currently exists in 79-3606, that exemption was denied. And this adversely impacts their funding for the project. So we think the solution is House Bill 2104, and 2104 is going to amend 79-3606 in two ways. And if you sat up last night and read 37 pages of the bill, I apologize, and I hope you slept well, because there are only two small changes in all those 37 pages. So if you have the bill in front of you, I'd like to just talk about that real quickly here. So the change one, first of all, let me just give you a little refresher here. So 79-3606, Chapter 79 deals with taxation. Most of you know that. Article 36 is on Kansas retailer sales tax, so 3606 is the exemptions there too. So on page 2, the bill adds one small line. It says, provided such housing will be inhabited by students of the educational institution. So the way to think of this is that amidst all these tax exemptions for retail sales tax exemptions, there's an exemption. But there's an exception to the exemption. And the exception has been that basically it states here, the exemption herein provided shall not apply to erection, construction, repair, enlargement, or equipment of buildings used primarily for human habitation. So this is why the KDR has denied that project certificate. So by adding the line, it says, provided such housing will be inhabited by students of the educational institution. So we think that this clears up that exception to the exemption, if you follow me, and we think that this clarifies the original intent of the legislature, and we believe, KDR believes, that this would allow them to grant that project certificate. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Vice Chair of Tax Committee did a thorough job explaining the bill. The last time I think we've even debated a sales tax exemption was a number of years ago. And the only difference, I think, with this one, I'm not someone that supports every sales tax exemption and, expand that statute to 55 pages. But in this case, they did go to KDOR. They did get a ruling, I think, on their original community building that they were redoing, Representative. And then they went back and said, oh, no, you have to pay taxes when you rebuild where the inhabitants are going to live. So it was a little bit different than a straightforward exemption. That's why I supported it in tax committee, and I'm going to support it going forward. But I'm going to leave it up to you, colleagues, to make that decision when we vote tomorrow on final action. Thank you.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would Carrier stand for a question, please?
Yes, certainly.
I'm aware of that we're looking at one organization for this, but there is another organization that I'm aware of, and that's Starkey Incorporated, who builds housing for their clients and residents. Are you aware whether Starkey would also fall, from Wichita, would also fall under this exception?
I think there are several organizations around the state that could fall under this clarification of the exception to the exemption. In fact, there would be one in my home district, McPherson County, that they're kind of looking at this with interest because they too have clients that they provide assisted, or not assisted, but independent living to. So yes, I think it would open it up for other groups such as Starkey. We did have proponent testimony from Interhab saying that, the main reason we were doing this was for CPRF, but they did believe that others would fall into this category.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that there would be other organizations other than Cerebral Palsy's organization that would be open to this exclusion. So thank you very much.
There's no further discussion. Representative, you may close.
Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it would report House Bill 2104 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Mason to report House Bill 2104 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. This concludes our general orders. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion to rise and report. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole recommends House Bills 2178, 2187, 2070, 2158, 2096, and 2007 be passed. House Bills 2087, 2115, 2172, 2076, 2104 be passed as amended.
Speaker recognizes Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The committee report is adopted. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
Committee on Financial Institutions and Rural Development recommends House Bill 2237 be passed. Committee on Health and Human Services recommends House Bill 2254 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Health and Human Services recommends House Bill 2262 be passed. Committee on Health and Human Services recommends House Bill 2261 be passed. Committee on Local Government recommends House Bill 2175 be passed.
With some more bills that came in, we'd like to return to that order of business. Is there objection? Seeing none, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2398 by the Committee on Appropriations, an act concerning financial institutions, enacting the Technology-Enabled Trust Bank Act, relating to requirements, fiduciary powers, duties, functions, limitations for trust banks, trust bank pilot program, prescribing administrative powers and duties for the State Banking Board and the State Bank Commissioner. House Bill number 2399 by the Committee on Appropriations, an act concerning retirement and pensions relating to the Kansas Public Employees Retirement System, amortizing a certain portion of the unfunded actuarial liability of the system for a period of 24 years, eliminating certain level dollar employer contribution payments, establishing procedures for lapsing and decreasing certain amounts of employer contributions for state agencies for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. House Bill number 2400 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act enacting the Massage Therapist Licensure Act, concerning regulation and licensing of massage therapists, powers, duties, function to the State Board of Healing Arts.
Announcements. Representative Woodard will replace Representative Bishop on the House Health and Human Services Committee today, Wednesday, February 17th, for this day only. Representative Hoy will replace Representative Bishop on House Insurance and Pensions Committee today, February 17th, for this day only. Representative Dan Hawkins will replace Representative Howard on the Ag and Natural Resource Budget and on Social Service Budget Committees for today, Wednesday, February 27th, or excuse me, February 17th only. Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, we will have agenda tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. via Zoom. Thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Johnson County delegation is meeting today in person in 281 North. The nurse anesthetists are our presenters. If you prefer to Zoom, then a link was sent out to a WebEx by Robin Crumpton for the meeting, so look for that. And lunches are available downstairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Jacobs. Is it green?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Apologize, body. In room 121 East today, we're going to have prayer caucus. Everybody's invited. Please come. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other announcements? Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Legislative prayer breakfast Thursday, Friday 18th at 7 a.m., room 142 South. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further announcements? Seeing none, Majority Leader Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans, we will have calendar tomorrow morning at 8:30 via WebEx. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Thursday, February 18th at 11 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.